And now here's part 2 of our episode.
We're back. We're recording. So now say only smart things. Here we go.
Stewart only says smart things. That's why we brought him on, Michael.
We'll say smart things about the track we just listened to. Smart things about that.
Yeah. So why is that the standout track, Stewart? Why would you say that?
Man, because it hit me like a ton of bricks. Being real, like that's a track when I heard that I felt like also was something that I feel like is a shift that should be happening in the rap game, right? Like, because with the community in general, we have a lot of issues with regarding like toxic masculinity and like the messed up things that can come from that, and like. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes, you know, it's not even like intentional, but they kind of like, even when I was a kid, you know, my OG would be like, I think, and look, shout out my mama, you know what I'm saying? That's one of the best parents out here. You know what I mean? Like that's top tier. Your mom's not better than my mom, but I'm not hating on your mom. You know what I mean?
A million points. A million points for your mom being the best mom.
Yeah. But there was also things that I feel like she was like aware of the world itself and knew that it wasn't necessarily fair, but like knew that I had to have in order for me to survive. You know what I mean? Like she was like, Stewart, sometimes you gotta toughen up. Like you gotta be able to have a thick skin. And I know it's not fair and I'm sorry, but like you have to be able to get through this world that we're living in. Cause like when I was in high school, you know, I was about almost 6 foot. I was a little bit bigger, you know, cause I used to play football, and she was like, Stewart, look, it's not fair. You're like 15, but people are not going to look at you like you're 15. You know what I mean? You have to be able to be tough. You got to be able to control your emotions. Because a lot of times, and I've noticed it when I was working in jobs, and I would say even specifically like when I was working at certain places recently, you know what I mean? I would have experiences where it was hard for me to show emotion because it would scare people or it would like startle them, because a lot of the times I was usually jovial. And the thing is, I am a very jovial person. I am. This is not me trying to have a pity party or anything like that. It's just more so that sometimes it's tough to have emotions or to show emotion. And a lot of times I think because, right, like you hold those emotions in, when you finally get them out, it's hard to really articulate them in a way that is easily digestible. And even when I would say I've had experiences where it was, or where I did form it into a way where it was palatable, I was still called like either a bully or different other things like that. And I've realized, sadly, it just kind of comes with the territory. And I think one of the things that was hard to address was like, yeah, you know, my relationship with my dad is a part of that. My not having as much of a relationship with my dad in certain areas when I was younger is a part of that. Growing up in Chicago and just like being, you know, a young black kid, regardless of, you know what I'm saying, gender, I would say just being a young black kid is hard. You are seen as an adult way before you really are one. And so a lot of the times, you know, even with interactions with like law enforcement or different things like that, like there are moments where like I have moments where I want to be emotional, but like being emotional could get you killed. You know what I mean? And so in a way, you start to kind of apply that to everything in life, and you start to shut down or try to control those emotions and pretty much just put a face on for people. And it's not like it's not who you are, but it is something that you maintain. And once somebody sees like that crack or sees through it a little bit, sometimes they can be a little frightened by what's underneath the mask. Because I think, like, even working as a teacher, like, regardless of race, I feel like teachers, you know what I mean? You have to, like, I am Mr. Romeo, and I am here, and, you know what I'm saying? I never have a bad day, and I'm feeling good, and I'm here, and I'm working with you guys, and I support you, da-da-da. And that's a positive thing. That's good. But also, you're a human being, you know what I mean? You have different stresses and different things that you go through, and you just kind of bottle it up. And I realized that from my perspective, because I can really, you know what I'm saying, I can shift my perspective to see from other people's, but I can't necessarily experience theirs. But as like a black man, right, like I've known that even with friends, right? Like I've had situations where I've gone through a bad breakup and I should have probably gotten, therapy sooner or gone to, you know what I mean? And the guys were like, man, come on, let's go get drunk or let's go turn up. Let's, we gonna do something or we gonna go holler at some girls or something. And that's kind of part of that. It's part of protecting those emotions by just drowning it out or like pushing it away. Cause that's a better way of dealing with it, because dealing with it the way that would be, I think, a little bit more helpful is either emotional or like frowned upon. You know what I mean? Like that's girl stuff. You know what I'm saying? And that can be a tough thing, especially when, like, just to use the beginning line of the song, I got daddy issues as well, right? And like that doesn't necessarily mean like I'm being like weak about it, but also, my father wasn't necessarily there most of my life, and that has an effect on how I view my relationships and how I view people. I think another one of the lines that really does like track with me a lot is like that relationship piece where he's talking about how, where if you took some lichens around me, I might reject the love. Cause like when I was growing up, like it's like family, friends, and then like that's it. Like, and even that is kind of hard sometimes, because at the end of the day, they're not blood, right? And that can kind of make it hard to form solid relationships. I think it's also because I like bounced around high schools a lot, but those things kind of make me like, yes, I like to make friends with people, but I don't assume that those people are like my friends for real. And that's fucked up to say. And it's not on those people. Sadly, it's more so on myself. I have accepted at this point in my life that not everybody is going to want to be my friend or be my friend. And so I almost am like, well, if it happens, cool, but I'm not going to reach out. I'm not going to hit that person up and be like, hey, I haven't seen you in a minute. We should hang out. Or, hey, I'm going to this city. Do you want to go? Like, I don't do that. And I think it's because of some of those experiences that I had growing up, which is why I think this song resonates with me. At the end of the day, nothing's going to be more valuable to me than my relationship with my family, even though that might not always be perfect all the time. Like, family trumps everything else. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it can be a bad thing. I think most of the time it's a good thing, though. But it also makes it hard once, like, I got to college and I had, like, a couple friends, but I didn't make, like, a whole lot of friends because I was standoffish. I was like, well, I mean, I don't really know nobody. I can't really trust nobody here. I don't know none of them. They not even from the same city I'm from. And most of the people that I made friends with were people who I didn't know who had come from Chicago. And I realized that, like, after my freshman year. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to start making some other friends because I'm really kind of only being cool with people from Chicago, and it's kind of tough.
It's a good test, though. I mean,
yeah.
If you have any relation to Chicago, I'm going to have something to talk to you about. I do the same thing. I do the same thing in social situations.
Yeah, and so I think that's the reason why this song hits a lot for me. I think I've definitely been a workaholic in my life at times. Definitely been somebody who, I've missed multiple friends trips, and I'll be real about that. Shout out the Vegas crew. But I've missed multiple trips with friends. Missed 2 trips to Vegas.
10,000 points for the Vegas crew.
Man, look, missed a trip. I think they went on a cruise that they had told me about. And at first I was going to go, then I was doing a show, and I was like, no, the work's more important, And I think a lot of the times I neglected those friendships because that wasn't necessarily at the top of like my priority list, and they suffered, you know what I mean? So that's partly on me, and it's hard to accept or to see that like you could also have played a part in that, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm working on that to like rebuild those friendships now, but like some, once the deed is done, it's done.
And that's kind of that tough love for yourself, right? That I think we often think about tough love in the way of we're giving it to somebody else or we're receiving it from somebody else. But to me, it seems like discipline is tough love targeted towards yourself, which I struggle with that too. I struggle with feeling like I want to be understood and understand others, but sort of knowing that there'll always be some distance between you and another person, and just being able to hear somebody, just being able to say, I hear what you're saying. I see what you're doing. Maybe that's enough most of the time. And I can see that. I can see that in his body of work in total. But in this one in particular, it's like maybe I will never. Well, I think this tough love line that Sampha does throughout the in the hook, it really it ties this song together really well, because he's saying that we have to have tough love for everybody, I guess I guess is kind of how I hear that.
Yeah, it's tough love, bottled up, no chasing.
No chaser.
Take that. It doesn't matter who you are. You gotta take that shot
straight. Yeah,
and it's gonna burn.
Yeah, for sure.
But you'll be all right.
So let's talk about what makes this album perfect for you. I mean, we don't define the word perfect; we leave that open ended.
Of course.
Yeah. So when you decided to put this one on your list, what are the qualities about it that makes it perfect?
Okay, is it cool if I start with a story?
Yes.
Always.
Cool. So there was this video essay that I saw a little while before I heard Miss Morale and the Big Steppers, and this was in the middle of me like trying to figure out who I was even as a artist. And it was this woman who was like a famous author. He didn't say the lady's name, so I'm sorry, but I don't know the lady's name. She wrote these incredibly like sad and macabre books, and she was talking about how like the sadness and the depression that she was in at that time kind of like helped her write those books. And once she got better, she got to a point where she couldn't write as well anymore. And I think the thing that kind of like struck me when I was hearing it was like, oh shit. And that's part of what like I think subconsciously made me have a slight aversion to therapy, because I thought, oh, well, I mean, artist pain, that's part of where that comes from. You have to be able to feel that and feed off of that sometimes to make some of the greater things that really can be like, as Pharrell says, house music. And we're not talking about the genre, we're talking about music that could buy you a house. And I really worried about that like a lot. And through the video essay, like she still found a way to write like different types of books, but she never got back to like that same level that she was at when she was writing through the depression and through the agony. And his whole thing was looking at how depression affects us and how it either like how that pain can be turned into great art. And is there a possibility of there being great art after you work through or start to work through the pain? And subconsciously, that's a question I kind of always had. And I think when I heard this album, I was like, maybe it really is possible to still create these great bodies of work and create these things that are of that level after you've pushed past the pain or started to work through the pain and really look at it at a different lens. I think that this album is the perfect album to help you realize that there is art and beauty in the art beyond trauma and past trauma. I think that a lot of times people think that a part of what makes the art great is the pain that comes from it and like the trials. And that is true. But I do think also that there is a benefit and there is a joy and beauty that can come from art that is worked through it or pushed past it, especially in rap, even though rap kind of started from a place of trying to express the trauma that was felt from a community who was dealing with a lot of different systematic oppressions as well as just overall pain and strife. But I think there is beauty in hip hop past that and through that.
So regarding that pain that you were talking about, I will say that when I was listening to this album, I struggled with 2 tracks on it. I think we only have time to talk about one of them. That one being Anti-Diaries, during which, I mean, dear listeners, if you want to go ahead and read up on, there have been multiple takes on the song and what things mean and who he's specifically talking about within the song. I mean, it's largely believed that within the song he is misgendering a couple members in his family, specific who have either, I don't know if they've had gender confirmation surgery or if they've just declared themselves as being trans. Again, we don't know all those details, because also something we haven't talked about is Kendrick has been relatively tight-lipped about this album in terms of like, whereas in the past, I think he's done a lot of interviews, and this time not so much. But also in the song, he uses the homophobic F slur, and he uses it several times within this song. And I'm not trying to burst your bubble on this or whatnot. And listeners, we did sort of let Stewart know that we were going to talk about this, so we're not.
I think it's fair to talk about
surprise here, but I'm just wondering why you think he feels the need to use the word so many times, especially in a song where he's rapping about coming to terms with this and his understanding of gender within his own family. Why, like gender and sexuality within his own family? Why use the word so many times?
I think the thing that I will start with is that I think this is where we get to the point in art where I have trouble sometimes, because I think I get what he was doing. Like through the song, it's supposed to show from him being ignorant and being using the word freely to him starting to use the word less, to by the end of the song him not using it at all. It is a artistic and like tool. What I think the problem is that I think a lot of people don't, especially I think in our community, sadly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done breaking down homophobia and breaking down how we look at other communities when it comes to certain words, because we have words that we don't want other people using. And I think it's hard for this one because I wasn't a fan of the choice. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of that part of the song. I think the thing that I had liked about the song was that by the end of it, I saw that he was making real changes and trying to address that. I think to a community that has been thinking the way that he starts the song, that they should end up where he ends up at the end of the song, where he says the F word instead of saying the actual word itself. I think using our artistic tool this is where like trying to use art to get people to understand something can get really messed up and muddy, because I don't think that this was the greatest attempt. I think he's speaking from the lens that he has existed in. And I think the reason why he chose to do it that way, which I, again, do not necessarily condone, to be honest, is to speak to a community that has been acting this way the whole time. And then by the end of it, trying to get them to understand that, like, y'all saying this word, and even me saying this word in this song, is just as bad as white people saying the N-word. And I think I don't think it takes saying that word 10 times in a song to get there. But I do think, sadly, we're talking about this is a word that in rap has been used a little too much. And I get the intention of the song, but the execution, I don't think was as good as the intention was, which is why I've had a lot of conversations with people about this project saying, like, that is something that sadly I don't have like a super solid defense or explanation for. It's more so, I think it was a good idea that wasn't fully thought through and wasn't fully looked at how it could honestly be something that could be extremely divisive. Because I think in most of this album, it's supposed to be just him doing it and saying, like, look, this is what I'm going to do. And that's all that matters. And I think for a lot of these songs, that execution works well. But I think for the two songs that you actually spoke of in general, I actually don't think work super great, which is why I was talking about earlier the trauma porn. That's just the trauma porn aspect of that, which I get why.
That's
we cry together. Yeah. Because I think, right, like it is, and it's the same thing. The end of the song has a very solid message, but he is like vividly describing something that I don't think necessarily needed to be vividly described.
Right.
Just being real. Like, even when I talk to like some of my friends who listen to music about it, like that has always been like the crux of my issue with Kendrick Lamar, is that sometimes, like, and this is obviously, this is also one of the dangers about art being something that is like necessarily supposed to be not free of judgment, but free of like, just make the art and people are going to have their opinions. I think that you can still take, people's feelings into account, but it also has been known to hinder artwork. So artists have a issue with trying to be politically correct. And I think his intention was to be non-politically correct to help people understand the message. But I think this was a moment where it might have gone, I wouldn't even say might have, it definitely went too far. I can still tell that story without saying it, but he's saying it to say, like, this is something that I was doing and I accept that it was wrong. But he also said, that's like if Paula Deen had gotten in trouble, like when Paula Deen got in trouble for saying the N-word, if she had apologized by saying nigga 7 times and then said, but I know it's wrong now. So I understand that it's definitely not the right execution. Yeah, man.
I honestly had forgotten about Paula
Right?
Dean
You know,
until you just mentioned
it's
Paula
crazy.
Dean.
But to you know, and I think that's something that we should call Kendrick Lamar out for, and I think that's why it's hard for him to do interviews on this, because it's not something to easily explain or defend.
Yeah.
And it was an artistic choice. I don't think it was a good one, but sadly it was an artistic choice. We don't have to have blinders that are completely keeping us on one line, but we do need to have some type of, I think, mindfulness and awareness when it comes to these things. And that's one of the sour points of this album for me, even though I do think it's a perfect album about rehabilitation in terms of the rap gang. This shouldn't have been the first step in the conversation necessarily, but sadly, this was the first step that we got. I think the conversation needed to be had, but this is not the best way to start it, is what I'll say. I don't think we should have shown up to the table like this.
I did read one like little interview or article or something. I was able to find one where he talked about how he didn't talk to any of his family members or friends before he recorded the album on purpose, so that like when he could work all this shit out. But he felt like if he had spoken to them, it would have changed things. And so he's actually said that it has initiated conversations. And yes, some people were pretty pissed off about it, but it kind of did what you were just saying that it was sort of intended to do. Like, okay, we're going to start the conversation. Great. I'm going to do so in a really difficult way. And I'm probably going to make some mistakes along the way, but maybe it'll at least get the conversation started.
Yes, which is one of the things that I hope is like the benefit, and that we start to shift from using that word and from the way that we look at homophobia, because it's honestly a construct of people who aren't even really a part of either of those communities. Like, this is something that has been used to divide people, just like race is used to divide people, just like class is used to divide people.
Yeah.
And once we get to the point where we take the need to use those slurs out, I feel like we'll be in a better position. But sadly, I don't know why. I can't say. I don't know Kendrick Lamar personally, but that was the way that he chose to start the conversation.
Well, when we have him on, we'll talk to him more about it. And when we have him on, we'll have you as well.
I was about to say, let me know, please, because that would be dope.
If we manage to get Kendrick on this show, Stewart, we're calling you. You get to be on.
I appreciate that, man.
I will also just say that it makes, because he has that line towards the end where he was, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's like something about like, I didn't think words really mattered in the way that they did, but then it became clear to him. He's saying how it became clear to him that words do matter and they're impactful. And I think there is something about it being music that we're talking about here, as opposed to film or a visual medium, where language is the only way in which he has to, in which he is, expressing these ideas and trying to go on this journey. It's the same thing that we're talking about when you talk about sexual violence in film and theater and all those sorts of things, like what should be depicted, what shouldn't be depicted, and why. I think, I think you're right about this being like a part of that larger conversation, that there really is, we're all just sort of taking stabs at it and failing a lot of the time at trying to figure it out. But I guess that's kind of part of trying to get better at it. I want to give you 9,000 points, by the way, for all of that. 9,000 points for,
I appreciate it,
for talking about the conversation, I guess we'll say.
I hope that was something that was helpful and not just like me talking around it, because I really wanted to like talk about it.
Absolutely. No, I think you were talking about it. I mean, I think it's like I said, I mean, I listened to it a bunch of times trying to see like, well, he must have had some reason, because like I'm not here to censor, and I'm not here to say people can't say something, but I'm asking that people think about why they're saying it. And Kendrick Lamar strikes me as such a purposeful artist. That's why I was like, no, let me listen. Let me see if I can figure this out. And I was just really struggling, and also acknowledging my own sort of like, I've been called that word a bunch of times. So like, it's not my favorite word in the English language. So it's trying to reconcile that. But thank you very much for talking about that.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
No problem at all.
So this has been I think this is an album that really, I mean, it'll bear a lot of repeating, and I'm interested to see how it ages too, like as part of his body of work, what comes next. And it seems like he's got some really exciting sort of like multimedia ideas that are coming up. So, Stewart, we couldn't have had somebody better to bring Kendrick to This One Goes to 11 than you. That is the absolute, at the very least, we have to say that. But let's go to the board, because we gotta assess how your case was. Okay. Right, so starting with those 9,000 points that we gave you for the conversation around, trying and failing in art. I think that's an essential part of the process, right? We gave you 10,000 points for the Vegas crew that you missed on while working. I'm sure they missed you too.
Man, I hope so.
I give you 1,000,000 points for shouting out to mom. Shout out to moms everywhere. 9,000 points for take your ass to the doctor, Kendrick. Thank you. Go to the doctor.
Go to the doctor.
And it was a short board today, but and then I gave you 3,000 points for being a good brother and remembering your sister's favorite SNSD member, Sonny.
Yes, sir. Shout out Sonny. Yes, sir.
Yeah, shout out Sonny. Sometimes the conversation flows so much I forget to give points, but nonetheless, it's add that to the B+, A- that you gave me for my 60-second recap on Kendrick. I think the board's looking pretty strong, don't you think?
I think so.
Michael, I put it to you, my friend.
Mhm.
You've heard the case that Stewart made. You see the points on the board. Tell me, does Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar go to 11? Is it a perfect album?
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say, Stewart. I'm going to say this album goes to 11 because you have made a very strong case for this. But I have a hard time using the word perfect to define it, but it's not because of you. But you, Stewart, you have made a very strong case. I'm actually glad I got to listen to this album in more depth. So, yeah, this album can join the Pantheon. It goes to 11.
I will take that. I will take that. I think that's very fair. I respect that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for doing this today, Stewart. It's such a pleasure to have you back on it, man.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I would love to be back again.
Yes, you're part of the family now.
Well, if someone in the future brings up another Kendrick Lamar album, we'll say, okay, cool, but Stewart has to also join the conversation.
Stewart's here too.
Oh, shoot.
Well,
so,
Tyler,
Michael, do you want to talk about what our standout track was?
I think you should talk about what our standout track was because because you're the one who sent me the message saying I think it should be this. So like since you initiated it,
I did.
What track did you choose, Tyler?
I chose Rich Spirit, and I think I chose Rich Spirit for two reasons. One, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, I can't remember if we were recording yet, but this is, on every hip-hop album, I think there is what I call the pelvic floor album that really just, it hits you right on the pelvic floor in all the best ways. And Rich Spirit is absolutely the pelvic floor song on this album. It is catchy, it's danceable. I think it talks about his idea of himself, and it's like it encapsulates so many of the great themes that are running through the album at large. And there's also a great video of him doing it. And he's sitting, was it at Paris Fashion Week at the Louvre? Yeah. He's sitting down. It's so strange. He's sitting down watching this fashion show. And there's something really, really cool about him doing. He's like, he has his legs crossed, and there's such power to it. And that's one of my favorite. I have a lot of favorite Kendrick live performance videos, and you can go down a rabbit hole on YouTube with any number of them. But that one is definitely one that is worth a watch. Is Kendrick, Paris Fashion Week, Rich Spirit. You're gonna love it. So that's the one we chose, and that's one we'll be playing out on today. And
you're down with this track too, Stewart?
Oh, 100%. This is my other favorite. I had put Father Time and I had put Rich Spirit. These was my two.
Perfect.
Excellent. Well, let's have our listeners give that one a listen, and I guess we'll see you / hear you, or you'll hear us next week. This whole like hearing stuff on podcast. You got it. We'll see you next week.
Bye now.